One of the fastest ways you can tell whether a sales organization will scale consistently is to ask this one question. If all your salespeople were given a sales opportunity, would they all handle it the same way? In many complex B2B sales, the answer typically is no. Each salesperson, well, they run their own conversations. They qualify the deal differently. They ask very different questions. They move opportunities based on their own judgment. And at first, this doesn't seem like a problem. And even companies feel like this is flexibility and it's a strength. They assume that every single salesperson has their own style, their own flair, puts their own personality on it. But over time, something begins to happen. Forecasts become very unreliable. New salespeople take months and months, sometimes even years, to become productive. Leadership, well, they struggle to understand what's happening inside of the deals, and the business becomes dependent on one or two high-performing individuals. What sits underneath all of that usually is the same issue. There's no consistent sales process. In this video, we're going to explore why that matters so much in complex B2B businesses and how defining a clear, structured sales process can become one of the most powerful growth levers available. When every single salesperson sells differently, the organization loses visibility. In fact, it loses control. Leadership doesn't know what good selling actually looks like. One salesperson, well, they might qualify opportunities thoroughly before progressing. Another one might move deals forward quickly just to really keep the pipeline looking healthy and to make them look good, make them look busy. A third might spend months nurturing conversations that were never really real opportunities in the first place. From a distance, the pipeline appears active, but inside the pipeline, the quality of opportunities varies dramatically. This inconsistency creates several hidden costs. Forecasting becomes very difficult to trust. Sales meetings become more of a talk fest, maybe storytelling sessions, instead of real analysis. And leaders find themselves consistently asking the same question: is this deal actually real? So over time, the business becomes dependent on a few individuals who seem to just figure things out. But that kind of success is fragile because if those individuals leave, performance drops dramatically. See, high-performing sales organizations don't rely on individual approaches. They define a consistent process that everyone follows. Because at the end of the day, sales is a formula, not a fluke. Many companies believe they already have a sales process because the CRM contains stages. You might see stages like a lead, an opportunity, proposal, negotiation, closing, but those aren't stages. They're just labels. They don't define actually what needs to happen for the deal to move forward in each stage. A milestone-centric sales process works differently. Instead of simply naming stages, it defines specific criteria that must be met before deals progress to the next stage. For example, has the customer problem been clearly identified? Has the decision maker or makers, because it might be a committee in complex sales, been identified? Is the impact of the problem on their business clearly understood? Is there a real timeline for action? Do they have the budget? Has the buying process been clearly clarified? Each stage of the pipeline has a clear qualification and exit milestone. The deal only moves forward when the milestone is achieved. The deal should only move forward when the criteria is met and the milestone is then achieved. But it also creates visibility for the leadership because deals are no longer progressing based on gut feel and optimism. They move forward based on science, based on data, based on evidence. And that's how you get consistent and predictable growth. Look, another common mistake we see in complex B2B selling is sales people pushing deals forward according to the seller's timeline instead of the buyers. Sales people often want the deals to move quickly, so they tend to push proposals and pricing out far too early in the process. But industrial, complex B2B buyers usually follow a very, very different decision process. They start by exploring whether a problem is worth solving, problem aware. They then evaluate possible solutions, possible suppliers. Then they involve additional stakeholders, CEO, manufacturing manager, CFO, you get the picture. And only later they start discussing price or implementation. When the sales process is aligned with the buyer journey, conversations flow naturally. The salesperson isn't forcing the deal forward, they're guiding the customer through the journey the buyer needs to make. Really, this dramatically increases confidence on the buyer's side and trust. And confidence is one of the most important ingredients to closing complex B2B deals. One of the biggest hidden costs of the undefined sales process is the onboarding time. It's the ramp up time of new salespeople. In many industrial sales companies, new salespeople take 6 months, maybe even a year to fully be productive. And during that time, they're often trying to piece together how selling actually works inside that business. They observe other salespeople, they sit in sales meetings, and often they slowly figure out which questions to ask and how deals typically progress. But when there's a clear sales process, this learning curve becomes much shorter because new hires don't have to guess. They step into a documented sales system. They know what information needs to be gathered. They know which ideal customer they should be talking to. They know what milestones must be achieved before progressing. This allows them to become more productive far faster and allows leadership to coach performance with much greater clarity. The final step in building a scalable sales organization is turning the process into a playbook. See, a sales playbook captures the institutional knowledge that top performers use every single day, the questions they ask, the problems they look for, the signals that indicate this is a real opportunity, the objections they encounter, how to deal with those objections, and ultimately how they guide the customer through making a decision. Without a playbook, this knowledge lives inside of people's heads, which means the organization constantly risks losing it. But when that knowledge is documented, shared, trained, and coached on, something really powerful happens. Good selling behavior becomes repeatable. Average performers improve faster, and leadership gains a clear framework for coaching the team. At that point, sales stops being dependent on a few star performers. It becomes a capability that the entire sales organization can execute. And that's what creates predictability and consistency. Salespeople are often working hard, but the problem is usually structure. When every salesperson runs their own approach, leadership loses visibility. Forecasts become unreliable, onboarding becomes slow, and growth becomes fragile, stagnant, maybe you're even going backwards. But when a business defines a clear, milestone-centric sales process, everything starts to change. Opportunities become easier to qualify, forecasts become more accurate and predictable, new salespeople ramp up much faster, and the entire organization starts to operate with more clarity and consistency. Because the companies that scale successfully don't rely on individual talent alone. They build sales systems that make good selling repeatable. And in a complex B2B environment, a clear milestone-centric sales process is often the biggest single lever for consistent sales growth. If you're looking for more information on how to actually develop a sales system, download the CEO's Guide to High Performance Sales.